Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_daddy. Well, as far as news and notes go, really the only thing anybody seems to care about right now, understandably so, the only thing that's interesting happening right now is the injury report. That's about it. That's all we got going on. And so I'm not going to waste a bunch of time, even though I got a lot of other random NFL stuff to talk about. Let's just get to it. Limited today in practice. Bullard, Edgar and Cooper, Brenton Cox, Dillard, Love, Walker, Williams, Malik Willis. Jordan Love, although limited, was able to throw, so that's at least good. There have been some alarm bells going off about, the dangers of potential nerve damage, if that's what it is or whatever, so we'll just take it a step at a time. Did not practice Zane Anderson, TJ Slayton, and Christian Watson. Obviously, we don't even need to have Watson on this list, but they have him there, so I will read it. Quay Walker and Evan Williams are expected to reintegrate into the defense if they are cleared. So, in other words, if they're healthy, are they going to play because they've been gone kind of a while? The answer is yes. He did talk a little bit about the coin flip situation. He said it depends on weather conditions and strategic advantages and whatnot. I have continued to say I really cannot find any strategic advantage or disadvantage one way or another, other than things like psychological advantages of going up on an early lead or whatever the case may be. I would think if you feel you have an offensive advantage, you would want to take the ball first. And if you think you have a defensive advantage, you would want to kick the ball away. But even that is whatever. I know we all worry about getting the ball twice in a row, but really that's more of a, in the moment it feels bad, but there's really no advantage. Because like I said, all there are possessions. How many offensive attempts you get, and then how well you do with those attempts. And each team gets one half to have an extra offensive possession. Whether they do or don't is questionable. But, for example, if you get the ball in the first half and you end with the ball and you score last, you got an extra offensive possession. And then the other team will get an opportunity to get an extra offensive possession the next time. The fact that it's sort of back-to-back, it feels like a thing. It's not a thing. It's kind of irrelevant. All it really means is the other team did not get that extra possession. You got the last possession and you scored, which is what you want. Whether you score on the next possession is a lot less relevant than whether you score on the last possession here. Because if you score on the last possession of both games, then you got an advantage of one extra possession. And really, that's the benefit of all these fluky plays in terms of interceptions or whatever. While technically it's still the other team had a possession, you're essentially stealing their possession and giving yourself an extra one. So you want to hoard as many possessions as you can and take away as many possessions as they have, and then just try to have a high conversion rate from possession to score rate or whatever. Scores per possession, points per possession. So I think there's a big hubbub made about it, and I'll acknowledge I don't like it when we take it first, just because that's been so ingrained in me. But from a rational standpoint, mathematical standpoint, I don't think there really is any serious advantage, other than, again, potentially psychological. If you're on the road and you have a really scary offense and you drive down the field and you punch it in, you might be able to take the crowd out of it for the rest of the game, which could be an advantage. Now, that's not to say you couldn't do that on the next drive, but, whatever. I don't know. I really don't think it matters. I think that's a massively overblown topic. Otherwise, Matt LaFleur just talked a lot about details and fundamentals, which, obviously is going to be critical for everybody once you get into the postseason. If you start making a bunch of mistakes, which the Packers have been prone to, then you're just done. It's pretty simple. So it's true. And, when you ask the question of what's the emphasis, that's obviously the emphasis. But it's also kind of a duh statement. By the way, I don't know if I officially said this. I mentioned we're kind of see how she goes as far as Jordan Love. I didn't necessarily mean in terms of playing. I just meant in terms of how he's doing. In terms of, whether he has sensation in his hand or whatever the case may be. He is going to play. In fact, Matt LaFleur specified that he could have gone back into the Chicago Bears game if needed. which I know sounds like a stupid comment considering we lost the game, like sounds like we might have needed him, but I guess at no real point did you know that you needed him. So I believe it's more of a question of, is he going to be playing at 100% rather than is he going to be playing? So, but I mean, who knows? There could be further issues that come up during the week, etc. But as of right now, yes, Jordan Love is playing. So I guess overall, I mean, obviously it's unfortunate the fact that Jordan is dealing with something, and obviously Christian, that situation is terrible, but we got the return of Romeo to practice. We got the return of Quay to practice. We got Evan Williams returning to practice. We got Brenton Cox missed the last game with a foot injury. He returned to practice. So, Dillard, although injured, returned to practice. So we're trending in the right direction, I suppose. All right. Couple of news and notesy kind of things here. What should we do first? Trying to find the most irrelevant and not interesting piece of information. There have been some firings. That has started. We started talking about that a little bit. The Raiders did fire coach Antonio Pierce following a trying season despite a flurry at the end. Per me, Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, and Mike Garafolo. One and done for Pierce, and Las Vegas is open once again. So they have been just a constant revolving door of coaches over there. Everybody seems upset that Pierce is gone, but at the same time, the Raiders have been one and done in coaches for quite a long time now, and their team sucked, and so I don't know what you necessarily would expect. Not to say it's 100% Pierce's fault, but I don't know. That's just how they do business out there, I guess. It's hey, would you like to coach here? Great. Here's a pile of terrible players. Can you get us to the playoffs, please? No? Okay, then you're fired. I don't know. This is just what bad teams do. I don't know what to tell you. It doesn't mean Pierce is a good coach. I have no reason to believe that, but I guess we'll find out if he gets hired somewhere else and has great success. In some more unfortunate news, the 49ers, per Sleeper NFL, are expected to make Robert Saleh an offer to rejoin as the team's defensive coordinator, per Josina Anderson. Saleh currently has a head coach interview scheduled with the Jaguars. So, I mean, first of all, half the Packer fans right now are upset with Saleh, thinking he's the reason for the fall off in our offensive production, which, I can guarantee you the timeline doesn't match up, but, whatever. Figure out whatever you want to feel about that. Bottom line is a lot of people don't seem to care, but he's not going to be staying with Green Bay in any capacity. He's taking head coaching interviews, and if those don't pan out, then he will probably take a defensive coordinator job somewhere. I mean, I guess it's not 100%. If he does some head coaching interviews and they don't pan out, whether that is the team decides to go in another direction or Saleh doesn't like the fit, the Jaguars are not a great situation necessarily. Not that any team looking for a head coach is a great scenario, but we'll get to that in a minute. Maybe he's not looking for a defensive coordinator role. He doesn't want to go back, so he could do what some other guys have done and become sort of a analyst type, kind of work from home, kind of like what he's doing with Green Bay. Maybe he would stay. I don't know. But more than likely, he will be moving on in one capacity or another. But speaking of the Jaguars, the reason why I say it's not super great, and this is really upsetting to me, the Jaguars are keeping GM Trent Baalke. This is via Ari Mirov a couple days ago. The reason that's frustrating is because, as I've been mentioning, the worst-kept secret in all of sports is Ben Johnson wanting to go to Jacksonville. Now, I'm sure that's not 100% a done deal. There's going to be a lot of teams that are fighting real hard to get him. I'm sure the Raiders, I know the Bears, pretty much everybody looking for a head coach is going to be trying as hard as they can. And so you want to sweeten the deal as much as is humanly possible. And Chicago is going to have a really hard time because they're keeping Poles. Well, now Jacksonville is also going to have a hard time because they're keeping Trent Baalke, which, just makes it more likely he goes to Chicago. Now, I don't know exactly how I feel about, whether he would be a good coach or not, but it's just a little annoying that teams are so stupid. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't know how good of the results have been awful for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I don't really understand why. If everything's going as poorly as it is, and you've got your quarterback of the future that you just paid a massive amount of money for, similar to several other teams where it's like, we got to get this guy going. I mean, he kind of had a bad situation year one with just a horrific coaching situation. Now we're on his, third coach or whatever. we gotta redo this thing. And it's like, yeah, but let's keep most of the structure and just like, it's like an injury that needs stitches and you just keep changing the Band-Aid. And it's like, I don't think that's going to do it, dude. On that note, GM Ryan Poles did say, in reference to Ben Johnson, said he's a brilliant play caller, but at the end of the day, we need a leader of men, which is fantastic because, it doesn't mean that they don't think Ben Johnson is a leader of men, but I don't know, man. The more I watch the Lions, the more I worry about how good of a job he does with offense. And if they're seriously going to sit there and look at a guy like that and say, yeah, but he's not a leader of men, and go get somebody, not Mike McCarthy because they blocked that, but, a guy that's kind of been there, done that, led a locker room before, I would be tickled pink with that decision. But the Bears are just scattershot in this thing. They have put in a ton of requests. This is not necessarily the full list because how would I know? But this is all I'm aware of. So Ben Johnson of the Lions, Aaron Glenn of the Lions, Anthony Weaver in Miami, Drew Petzig, Cardinals, Mike Kafka, Giants, Thomas Brown, Bears interim head coach, Mike Vrabel, former Titans head coach, Brian Flores of the Vikings, Arthur Smith of the Steelers, and Mike McCarthy of the Cowboys. So obviously a lot of these guys, I don't know when this would even happen. It's not going to be during the playoffs. Sorry if you can hear that printer in the background. That's freaking annoying. And Mike McCarthy was already blocked, so it wouldn't be Steelers, Vikings. Mike Vrabel possibly could be in the building there. Thomas Brown obviously could do his interview whenever he wants. He's not going to get the job, so it doesn't matter. If he does, I'm going to laugh just hysterically, but I'm sure that's just kind of something to do to be kind of polite since he stepped in, but you can pretty much just take a freaking permanent marker and just draw a line right through that one. Mike Kafka of the Giants, he's the offensive coordinator. I cannot imagine that's the pick. Even if he's a genius, that's just a disaster over there. But I think the funniest one is Brian Flores, and I honestly would love for them to hire Brian Flores because even if he's a great defensive coordinator, that's essentially exactly what they just hired. But in addition to that, you've got a guy that really had a terrible exit from Miami. Let me just play this for you real quick.
Flores has been a really hot name, and I think the further removed we get from his tenure in Miami, the more people kind of forget about how that ended, and the better his name becomes. He went to Pittsburgh and got to learn under Mike Tomlin and see how he led, and now he's been in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell. I think the interesting thing with Brian Flores, when I think about him and being able to play under him for a few years, is which version of Brian Flores are we getting? And in year one with Miami, take you back to that year, Miami got rid of every good player they had. And that was the jokingly called the tank for two a year. But I'll tell you, halfway through that year, we hadn't won a game yet. And there was a shift in the way that he was approaching his job. He was likable. He was relatable. He demanded a lot out of the players, but he was also able to get the best version of his players. And I really appreciated him for that. But as his tenure went on in Miami, he kind of became unrecognizable. A lot of the staff he brought over from New England, that was where, he cut his teeth in the NFL, was there for 15 plus years as an assistant. But I think he's going to have a really hard time if you're interviewing him as a head coach. I think in the interviews, he'll be likable, he'll be relatable. But when people say, okay, give me somebody from Miami that coached under you as a reference so we can talk to them, I think he burned a lot of bridges there. I think he alienated himself from the entire staff. Instead of what you were just talking about, having the humility to ask questions, to collaborate. I think by the end of his time there, he became a dictator. He ruined a lot of those relationships that he built up through the NFL. And his ego grew so big that there wasn't any room for anyone else. And so that was why he got released at the end of his tenure in Miami. I hope, we love Mike Tomlin as a leader. And I know you have some experience with Kevin O'Connell, that whole collaboration thing. I think that's, McVay and the people that come up through that system, for Flores to be able to watch Kevin for a year. I hope that helps him.
Yeah.
Because he certainly needs some help in that department of, not necessarily being a dictator and having a collaboration with the whole staff and having a lot of different voices in how they put together.
So just as a recap, and I went and got myself a little timeline here. And again, this is my favorite pick for Chicago. So Flores came over from New England, which, to be fair, is maybe why he had more of a dictatorial nature. That's kind of the way they do things here. It's you will do what you're told or you will get out of my face, which is, if you're Bill Belichick, maybe that works. Not a lot of people can pull that off, though. Got hired in 2019, February 4th, 2019. They lost the season opener, 59-10, September 8th. Didn't get their first win until November 3rd over the Jets. Ended with a 5-11 record. Flores later alleged that the Dolphins owner, Stephen Ross, offered him $100,000 for every loss to tank the season for a better draft position, which he refused. In 2020, they shot up to 10-6. It was the first winning season since 2003. However, they did miss the playoffs somehow. 10-6, that's rough. 2021, they went 9-8. Again, missed the playoffs. 2022, Flores was unexpectedly fired by Dolphins after 3 seasons following a 9-8 record. The reasoning given by Stephen Ross was related to internal collaboration issues within the organization. Then, February 1st, 2022, Brian Flores filed a class action lawsuit against the NFL, the New York Giants, the Denver Broncos, and the Dolphins. So NFL, Giants, Broncos, Dolphins. 3 teams and the NFL as a whole, alleging racial discrimination and hiring practices. Key allegations included Ross's tanking incentive offer, which I have no idea how that's related, sham interviews to satisfy the Rooney Rule, which I don't know how that would have anything to do with racial discrimination, and Flores being ostracized and ultimately fired for not complying with Ross's requests. That, I think, on its own would potentially be the lawsuit. I have no idea how racial discrimination would be provable in any of those situations. 2022 onward, the lawsuit continued to develop with more details emerging, including an amended lawsuit claiming Flores has sent a memo to the Dolphins executives about the toxicity within the organization and Ross's desire to lose games for financial incentives. Hardest part about all these allegations is that Brian Flores essentially had no proof of any of these things, including the fact that he was offered money for losses, not a single email, text message, nothing. And so that obviously just went bye-bye pretty quick. This is Ari Mirov posted this in 2022 or whatever. Dolphins did not intentionally lose games during the 2019 season, nor did anyone at the club, including Mr. Ross, instruct Coach Flores to do so. No witness contended otherwise. The Dolphins competed hard to win every game, including at the end of the season when they beat Cincinnati and New England, despite worsening Miami's draft position in 2020. On a number of occasions, Mr. Ross expressed his belief that the Dolphins' position in the upcoming draft should take priority over the team's win-loss record. So the bottom line is this is ugly stuff. This is not good. And just because Miami was, willing to say, look, this guy's a defensive genius, I don't care, bring him in here, and it all worked out great, that doesn't mean that there aren't owners around the NFL. They're going to look at Flores and say, not a frickin' chance. Now, with that said, I do think Chicago would seriously look at a guy like Flores. The reason I love that situation is because I think Flores and Caleb in a dysfunctional situation would be a disaster. Let me also remind you of some Flores comments toward Tua. Remember, Flores is the good guy that turned down money to tank. Here he is talking to his players. You suck at what you do. You don't belong doing what you do. You shouldn't be here. And you haven't earned this right. That is what Tua said Flores said to him about him. By the way, Flores, as far as I know, never denied that happened. He just said he wishes him the best. And, Jeff Darlington did a whole thing here. There was a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to go get somebody else. I'm going to go get Deshaun Watson, sending him text messages saying, don't blow this. That's Flores. So when I say I want the Bears to hire Flores to leave Minnesota where everything's great and go to this dysfunctional disaster of an area where Flores is going to get super pissed and work with a guy like Caleb, that's not good and kind of sucks and all that stuff. I just think that would be the greatest thing ever. And to hear reports about, I'm sure it wouldn't happen now that it's blown up in his face, but if there were reports, just imagine if the disaster that surrounded Flores in Miami happened in Chicago, it would just be the greatest thing in the world. Anyways, that's the update on their coaching search. I think my least favorite option is Ben Johnson going to Chicago. Not because I know anything, but just if I had to pick my least favorite option, my favorite option would be Flores. Plus, he leaves Minnesota, so win-win. All right, let's take a break. We got some more news and stuff I want to talk about. We'll be right back. All right, so I kind of alluded to this before, but it's worth noting there's a couple people that are shockingly, potentially going to be available. And again, 10 years ago, I would have said there's no chance. Today, stuff crazy happens all the time. Report, superstar pass rusher Myles Garrett met with the Browns front office this week to learn more about the team's plan to avoid a full rebuild, per ESPN. If the Browns don't have a clear path of contention in the eyes of Myles Garrett, don't be surprised if he tries to join another team. I don't know the full validity of all this. It does say per ESPN, so I always look for those things when I see like JPA football, because these people are not necessarily legitimate, but as long as it's citing somebody that actually matters, I'll pay attention. But it makes sense. I mean, Myles Garrett is an elite football player. He's arguably the best pass rusher in football. He's at least up there with, the top 3 to 5 guys. And the team is just spiraling out of control. It's run terribly. It's getting worse every single year. Even the defense that was pretty premier with him on it is not as fear-inducing as it used to be. So it's kind of funny to me that he would go to the team and say, "What's your plan? I don't want to rebuild," when at the same time knowing there's no plan. There's no plan. First of all, the only plan would be a rebuild. There's no plan to be like, "Oh, we're not going to rebuild. We're just going to be good next year." What are you going to do? "Oh yeah, Myles, we got a plan. We're going to trade, some random person for, I don't know, Justin Herbert, and we're going to get an all-new offensive line, even though we have no money because of our quarterback situation. But we're going to buy a whole new elite offensive line, put a good quarterback back there, find a couple receivers and a tight end, get you some help on defense, and go win a Super Bowl, right? How's that sound, big guy?" There's just no plan. Either go down with the ship or jump off it, Myles. Those are your options. So something to keep an eye on, because I'm pretty Ted Thompson-esque when it comes to things, but for a guy like Myles Garrett, I would give everything. Every single thing. Another name that's been floating around is Tyreek Hill. It looks like he's going to be moving on from Miami. He's been putting some interesting things out there. Ari Mirov, Dolphins wide receiver Tyreek Hill, says he wants out of Miami via Omar Kelly. Omar Kelly is, if you're not aware, I wasn't, a columnist for the Miami Herald. So 100,000 followers, and plus Ari Mirov is citing him, so I'm guessing it's a good source. And then beyond that, Ari Mirov quote tweeted that with a picture, a profile picture, that is, he had somebody Photoshop his face on Antonio Brown when Antonio Brown ripped his clothes, ripped his shirt off, his jersey off, whatever, in the middle of a game and ran off the field, obviously signaling he's leaving. So, he's going to be out there, pretty split on, as far as Packer fans, on whether or not they'd want him. I certainly understand why you would. He's got some problems off the field for sure. He's not a very good human being by any stretch of the imagination. If you don't care about that, then it's certainly an option. I mean, Matt LaFleur needs a field stretcher. He can do some special stuff with a field stretcher. Tyreek Hill fits. We'll leave it at that. In a similar vein, and this was 2-3 days ago for you, Tom Silverstein says, LaFleur said GM Brian Gutekunst is looking to see if there are some free agent players who can help them, since they potentially have 2 spots on the 53-man roster, Alexander and Watson. Likely would have to be someone who has played with them or in their system. Now, we are running out of time. In fact, by the time you're hearing this, I think we are out of time. In fact, let's see, 4 o'clock. Yeah, so never mind. We're already past that time now. 4 p.m. New York time, which would be 3 o'clock here, which is past, on January 8th, Wednesday following the regular season weekend. Rosters are frozen for clubs participating in the postseason with limited exceptions. So I don't know what those limited exceptions are, but let's just assume that no help is coming our way. And for those that want to start flipping tables, like, oh, GM never does anything. Bro, there are no options. There's no options. I mean, the best option for the Green Bay Packers right now might be Michael Thomas, who is like a 32-year-old broke-down wide receiver that hasn't been good in like 5 years. There's nobody just sitting out there that's like an elite player that just doesn't have a job right now that can just be picked up just for fun. So freaking calm down. A couple other little interesting tidbits here. According to Next Gen Stats, the hardest throws in NFL history right now, and this goes back as far as Next Gen Stats, presumably, so however far that is, at least 2018, because Josh Allen is number 6 on this list, 61.08 miles per hour. Number 1 on the list, hardest throws of a football in NFL history, number 1, Jordan Love, 61.98 miles per hour. Now, I never thought Jordan Love didn't have a strong arm, but he's not really known for having like just a rocket, like Josh Allen, for example. That's kind of crazy to me. And if you're wondering which pass that was, honestly, I think even more impressive than that is now the catch. Do you remember the diving catch that Tucker Kraft made in the end zone? Just an unbelievably athletic catch for a tight end. Apparently, that was a 62-mile-an-hour heater, which just makes the catch all the more remarkable. We talk about like these receivers not being able to catch anything that isn't just thrown right at their chest. And Tucker Kraft is catching the hardest throw in NFL history. Obviously, I'm sure Brett Favre had some serious freaking heaters in there. But as far as Next Gen Stats goes, the hardest thrown ball in the last 7, 8, 9 seasons, whatever it is. And it's a lay out there diving catch from our tight end. And then the NFLPA, the Players All-Pro. That's the title. I don't really understand what that means. Essentially, it's the players voting on stuff, whatever. For too long, we allowed everyone else to define the best of us as players. Now we make the calls with the Players All-Pro team. All right. And understandably, there are some elite players on here. Lamar Jackson at quarterback, Brock Bowers, the rookie tight end. What an absolute phenom that guy is. I mean, you want to talk about flying under the radar. We've talked about a couple other rookies. I don't think I've mentioned Brock Bowers once. I was thinking about doing sort of a like rookie awards thing. And Brock Bowers would probably be maybe just like the overall prize. It was funny because I was thinking like if I did a receiving award, I don't think a wide receiver would win it. I think Brock Bowers would. Just incredible. Receivers, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, et cetera, right? Elite players. On this list, by the way, Green Bay Packers safety Xavier McKinney, named NFL Players First Team All-Pro. But that wasn't the only All-Pro that got recognized. I mean, the term just kind of gets thrown around. I guess anybody can define what an All-Pro is. PFF also did their own All-Pro list. And on that list, we had right tackle Zach Tom. Safety Xavier McKinney was second team All-Pro at PFF. He finished behind Kirby Joseph and Kyle Hamilton, which Kirby Joseph at least makes sense. Kyle Hamilton. Dude's elite, but I mean, I don't know. My bias will let me overcome that one. But really glad to see some recognition. These are the kinds of awards I feel like the Packers don't win a ton of, and I think Packers fans get kind of annoyed by that. I don't super care about this stuff. I think a lot of terrible decisions are made. I don't think just because people play football that they know everything. I don't know. It doesn't make that big of a difference for me, but I know it does for the players. I know it means a lot to them. And I know a lot of fans who their concept of value comes down, a lot of it, to Pro Bowls. I mean, again, there's so many advanced metrics now. I understand if in 1994, if you want to find out the best players, you go look at Pro Bowl, All Pro, whatever. That's fair. At this point, I don't really care. But I'm glad to see the recognition. It is kind of cool. And it is a pretty rare thing. I was kind of shocked to see, if you go back and try to see how many like first team all pro guys there are. I was looking at draft classes, basically. I was arguing with somebody on social media, as always, about the draft classes. And there's just not a lot. I mean, not a lot of Packers guys have won these awards. Not a lot of guys, period, have won these awards. I mean, you look at some other teams, they haven't either. But I was still surprised because I know we have good players. And I have said in the past that I think the Packers, although Brian Gutekunst has done a good job finding really quality, even some high-quality guys, they they haven't really found a lot of, Myles Garrett's. Granted, most of these guys are top 5, top 10 picks, which we don't get. But still, they just, the Justin Jeffersons or the Amon-Ra St. Browns, even though I don't think he really would qualify for first-team All-Pro. But so, anyways, great to see that there's some recognition of not just good, not just great, but the greatest. But let's see, one more thing here before we take another break, if I can just find it real quick, via Tom Pelissero. Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts' concussion/left finger was listed as a limited participant in practice today, another step as he makes his way through the protocol ahead of Sunday's playoff game versus Green Bay. Been waiting on an official injury report from the Eagles. I suppose I can go look it up, but I don't know, whatever. Shout out to Wendell Ferreira, by the way, for posting this, just to kind of give us an idea. It was kind of confusing, the amount of guys that we saw that had, for example, concussions, but they're playing or, practicing. It's like, I don't know why you're allowed to do that. He went out and found the official NFLPA return to participation protocol. There's a 5-phase process. Number 1 is symptom-limited activity. The player is prescribed rest limiting or, very small font, if necessary, avoiding activities, both physical and cognitive. Number 2 is aerobic exercise. Under direct oversight of the team's medical staff, the player should begin graduated cardiovascular exercise and may engage in dynamic stretching. Phase 3, football-specific exercise. The player continues with supervised cardiovascular exercise. Phase 4, club-based non-contact training drills. The player continues cardio, strength, and balance training, team-based sports-specific exercises, and participates in non-contact football activities, throwing, catching, running, other stuff. Phase 5 is full football activity/clearance. Upon clearance by the club's physician for full football activity involving contact, the player must be examined, etc., etc. All right, so clearly in order to be a limited participant in practice, we've got to be several steps down here. I mean, we could, somewhere in 3 and 4. I mean, he wasn't cleared, step 5. So either in 3, which is football-specific exercises, or 4, club-based non-contact training drills is where Jalen Hurts currently is. I'm guessing he's in step 4. He's doing pretty much everything except contact, which quarterbacks really don't do contact drills anyways. Oh, and then one more thing. I missed this one. Via Easton Butler, update, Packers will be sending running back Marshawn Lloyd to the Badger Athletic Performance Facility at UW-Madison per Tom Silverstein. This is the same facility that Christian Watson and Eric Stokes were sent to last offseason to solve the issues with their hamstrings. Lloyd has suffered a hamstring, hip, and ankle injury in his rookie year. Now, I'm positive there are some cynics out there in the background. I can hear you chuckling, talking about how Watson got hurt again. I would like to point out the fact that Watson's injury had nothing to do with what he was sent there for. In fact, both Stokes and Watson went there with recurring injuries, specifically with their hamstrings. And as far as I know, neither one of them has had a single injury, soft tissue injury, since going to the Badger Athletic Facility. And so it makes sense that when you got a guy coming in and he's got, hamstring issues, number 1, also hip and ankle injuries, you at least want to get these people who have done a great job with 2 of our players to keep them on the field, at least, not having the same recurring issues, which is, by the way, why I really feel good about Christian Watson. It's unfortunate that he tore his ACL. I mean, as far as I know, there are no ACL strengthening exercises that he could have worked on, but whatever. Aside from sort of the fluke injuries, the recurring injuries, he made it the entire season, as did Stokes so far, made it through the entire season without dealing with those. So hopefully if we get him back and he doesn't have serious issues with the knee, hopefully we'll have some better success with him. And then again with, Marshawn Lloyd, same thing. I mean, sounds like the body is just not really responding super well. Some stuff, I don't know if we want to call it out of alignment or whatever, but let's just make sure let's just send the whole freaking team to them, okay? Let's just look things over and be like, oh yeah, your body sucks, dude. We got to work on some stuff here. How about some preventative, Technically this is preventative, but not really. Not preventative enough. But I'm glad he's going, and I look forward to Marshawn Lloyd next year. All right, let's take a break, and I'm going to do some, I don't know, you could call it complaining, I guess. A little ranting, whining, complaining, that kind of stuff, like I like to do. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, let's start with this. I've sometimes, and that's kind of the case with both or all things I want to talk about at this juncture. A lot of times, I just say things because it's just sort of evident, and I don't really do any sort of a deep dive. It's just sort of self-evident thing. Like, okay, well, here's why it's stupid. So this is just a comment, but it's what sparked everything, and I just happened to see it. Wendell Ferrer again says, talking about the Packers, they beat the 10-7 Seahawks, but that doesn't count because they're not a playoff team. Oh, they beat the Rams too, but that doesn't count because they were hurt, which, it's the NFL, that's what happens. And the Texans are a playoff team, but they're frauds. And Tua's Dolphins don't count either for some random reason. And we've talked about this before. The Packers have beat good teams. They just haven't beat those 14-win teams. And for some reason, people have convinced themselves that actually means something. I don't understand. He quote tweeted himself and said, it's funny that some people say, quote, the Packers didn't beat good teams, unquote. And when you say they beat the Rams, Cardinals, Texans, Dolphins, Seahawks, those people have a ready-made excuse for each one, which they do. Why? Because they haven't beat the ones that matter. Okay, let's discuss. What we're talking about here is the Packers have beat good teams, but they haven't beat the great teams, which is an expectation. So you expect the Packers to be able to beat the 14-win teams. Eagles are 14 wins. The Vikings are 14 wins. The Lions are a 15-win team. That's an expectation. Okay, so being unbelievably annoyed, I went back. This is what I tend to do. After a while, I get so sick of something, I'm like, let's just dive into it. And it ended up being much better in my favor than I expected. Here's what I wrote on social media if you didn't see it. The knock on the Packers is that they did not beat any 14-win teams. Do you understand how stupid of a standard this is? Here's a list of teams that did not beat 14-win teams. Okay? The 2008 Packers, 2009 Packers, the 2010 Packers, the 2011 Packers, the 2012 Packers, the 2013 Packers, the 2014 Packers, the 2015 Packers, the 2016 Packers, the 2017 Packers, the 2018 Packers, the 2019 Packers, the 2020 Packers, the 2021 Packers, the 2022 Packers, the 2023 Packers, the 2024 Packers. Additional bonus content, the 2024 Vikings, the 2024 Chiefs, the 2024 Eagles, and the 2024 Ravens have never beaten a team that ended the season with a 14-win record. I'm not talking about at the time. I'm talking about by the time the season ended. Did you play and beat a team that ended the season with 14 wins? Not a single team under the Aaron Rodgers era, not one, beat a 14-win team or better. Do you want to know why? I'll give you a couple reasons. Number one, it's very hard to beat a team that's that good. That's one pretty decent reason. Number two, you would be shocked to find out how many seasons there have been with 0 14-win teams. I didn't count it, but let me just tell you very comfortably, the answer is most seasons do not have any teams with 14 or more wins. Beyond that, the ones that do, almost always it's one team. The fact that there are 4 teams that have a 14-win season or better is shockingly unprecedented. The fact that the Packers played 3 of those 4 teams and it comprised 5 different games. Do you understand how many seasons I listed off in which none of these teams played a single 14-win or better team? Almost all of them. The Packers have almost never, through that entire stretch, played a single team that won 14 games. And in the rare instances that they did, they lost. We played it 5 different times. And rather than actually look at this honestly as a Packer fan and say this is a shockingly unprecedented situation in which the Packers have played some of the toughest teams ever, more times than any team has ever had to play them, we look at it and say, well, this is why you suck. What a stupid way to look at things. It's so unbelievably unfair to the Packers. Rather than saying they had one bad game in which they lost to the Bears, and all their other losses came against completely unprecedented, high-quality teams. Rather than looking at it that way, we just say, oh, they're frauds. They never beat any of the good teams. That's stupid. You understand that for all of Green Bay Packers history, at least going back to 2008, there's probably a couple exceptions, but let's just say going all the way back, if what you're saying is true, there has never been a good Packers team. There's almost never been any good teams, period. Like I said, the Chiefs haven't beat one. The Eagles have not beat one. The Ravens have not beat one. And the Vikings are 0-2, having played 14 win or better teams, those two teams being the Lions. They did not play the Eagles. They did not play the Chiefs. And they obviously did not play themselves. So it's very obvious when people say stuff like this that these are just hyper negative people that want to just crap all over a team that they pretend to root for and are being just shockingly biased against their own team. Shockingly. Because you're setting a standard that is so incredibly impossible. You're setting a standard that has never existed for anybody ever. When has anybody ever faced this standard? Every other year, if you asked what good teams did the Packers beat, they would have listed teams like the Rams, the Cardinals, the Texans, and the Dolphins. But because they played these shockingly good teams with great records, now those don't count? Frickin' be quiet. Oh, my Lord. But speaking of expectations, I'm going to pick on you today, Packer superfan. And it's more of just, again, it's like you keep seeing these things, and it's like on one hand, I know it's not true, and I've addressed it 1,000 times. On the other hand, I know that it kind of is true, and it's like, all right, we just have to stop and freaking reconcile this and figure this out for a minute, rather than just like steamrolling through stuff and be like, nope, stupid, nope. It's like, yeah, but it's true, right? It's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't freaking care. Here's a tweet from a very good friend of the show, by the way. I yell at a lot of people on Packernet After Dark and all that. I get freaking revved up when I talk. I love all you guys. So Ike Packers tweeted out, Super Bowl or bust. Packer superfan quote tweeted and said, yes, for this Packers team and moving forward. This is title town, not playoff town. Never forget that. So, I don't know, man. I kind of sat back for a second. And obviously, you've heard me talk about this 1,000 times. You cannot set an impossible standard and be mad when the team doesn't reach it. The standard is always Super Bowls, right? You know 1,000% that no team, including the Green Bay Packers, will ever win the Super Bowl every single year. So you know for a fact that you're setting up a standard that is impossible to reach, which makes it not a very good standard. On the other hand, we do fully acknowledge that, first of all, yes, this is title town, not playoff town. That's a fair point. But beyond that, for every team, what do we always hear? Super Bowl is what Bears fans love to say, to pretend that the Packers and Bears are on the same level. Like, oh, I mean, what's the difference? You didn't win the Super Bowl, we didn't win the Super Bowl. Basically the same. No, stupid. No. There's nothing similar about the two organizations. I'm so sorry. Aside from the fact that we're both old, no, you're trash. But it's still worth thinking it through for a minute. The Super Bowl is the expectation. That is the standard. That's what you're trying to get. And if you don't get it, you did fail to reach the thing that you're trying to do. To pretend that you're trying to do something else is incorrect. You're trying to do one thing, and that's win a Super Bowl. And if you didn't do it, then you failed. But the other thing I just said is also true. So what the heck are we talking about? Took me probably longer than it should have, but it's actually not that hard to reconcile. The fact of the matter is expectation is a big word that can have under it several different components. In other words, there's different kinds of expectations that you can set, not sit, or sit, I don't care. And so like most things, I just kind of had the robot kind of organize this a little bit for me, put it in nice little bullet points, whatnot. And maybe this isn't the best way to break it down, but this is the way that I broke it down, okay? There's different types of expectations. There are basic expectations, such as the expectation to wake up in the morning. Now, I may not do that, but that's sort of a baseline expectation. There are some baseline expectations that you set for a team that if you don't reach them, it's fireable. If you're a player and you can't do X, Y, and Z, then you probably shouldn't have a job. If you're a GM and you can't do X, Y, Z, you probably shouldn't have a job. Whatever that happens to be. But it's a very bare minimum expectation, right? Then there are aspirational expectations. If a rookie player doesn't play super well, you understand that although they maybe didn't meet whatever expectations, you do have an expectation that you will grow and that you will proceed to get better. If you're a team that missed the playoffs, you have aspirational expectations that you will reach the playoffs. Then there are idealized expectations. These are sort of the views, this is like the Super Bowl, it is the view of the pinnacle of success. It's winning a Super Bowl. It's the ultimate standard. It's the ultimate gold standard. It's the thing everyone is striving for. And then there are unreasonable expectations, which are things that just nobody is ever going to do, which is winning Super Bowls every year, expecting perfection in every game, et cetera, et cetera. The problem I have with a lot of fans, the negative fans, et cetera, is that they conflate number 4 with number 1. We're going to pretend that unreasonable expectations of everything being perfect is a basic expectation, like just waking up in the morning, or in the NFL, it would be, a quarterback that can throw beyond 10 yards or something. And because we're going to treat it like a basic expectation, because you didn't reach it, you should be fired. That's not how that works. You get fired for not meeting basic expectations. You will eventually get fired if you don't meet the aspirational expectations. We set a goal sometime in the future for some level of growth for a player or whatever the case may be. And if you never reach that, if you're, a player and it's, we've gone through the 40 years of your rookie contract and you've never been able to reach that next level, then we're probably going to move on from you. Idealized expectations, I don't know that there is necessarily it's not like aspirational in my mind to where if you don't eventually reach it, you get fired. Not to me. To me, you get to a certain point by being good. You have a good GM, a good coach, and good players, you're going to go to the playoffs. Never are you going to be able to guarantee a Super Bowl. And so what I'm saying essentially is, if you set a standard that you will win a Super Bowl, as in, again, treating it like an aspirational expectation, where if you don't eventually get there in a small window that I'm going to give you, let's say 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, if you don't get there, then we're going to fire you. What you're going to end up doing is getting rid of good coaches, good GMs, and good players, just because they're not getting you what you want, which is the ultimate goal. So we can apply the word expectation to things as though they're the same, but they're not. There are different kinds of expectations. And there is entirely too much conflating of all these different things and basically saying, well, the idealized expectation or even the unreasonable expectation, whichever one they feel like using, which basically are the same thing, the idealized expectation of winning the Super Bowl is the basic expectation, and because you didn't meet this basic expectation, you're fired. That's nope. The robot went on to sort of put it this way. Saying the goal is always championships is valid. That's aspirational, but treating anything less as an absolute failure conflates an aspirational expectation with a basic one, which is not fair. Winning a championship requires skill, effort, and a significant degree of luck. And this is the part that the negative fans refuse to accept. They don't think it takes luck. They think if with enough talent, with the right people, you just win, which is stupid because there's a lot of teams that have a ton of talent. So how can we win and they lose if they have talent too? Luck plays a massive, massive part in winning a championship. Treating it as the only acceptable outcome devalues other achievements. Number 2, you're neglecting context. Not every season is equal. If a team is in a rebuilding phase, expecting a championship might be unreasonable, but expecting competitive play or player development is more appropriate. Championship or bust ignores progress, like developing Jordan Love or building a strong supporting cast for future seasons. There's also fan investment and enjoyment. If every season without a Super Bowl is considered a failure, it diminishes the joy of milestones like beating rivals, making the playoffs, or seeing players grow into stars. Some useful concepts to flesh out. Number 1, spectrum of success. Success is not binary. Now, a lot of people would disagree with this, but that the idea being there's championship and then there's not championship. Again, this is what Bears fans like to say. Basically, the Packers and Bears have the exact same season every single year because success is binary. Either you win a championship or you failed. The problem with that, and I've said this 1,000 times, is that nobody believes it. Bears fans don't believe it. Packers fans who pretend that they believe it don't believe it. And you know how I know? Because they celebrate wins and get upset about losses that don't. Why would you be upset about the Bears game? It's an irrelevant game. It has nothing to do with a championship. So why are you mad? Exactly, because you don't believe success is binary. There is a spectrum including progress, competitiveness, and entertainment value, which for some people there is no entertainment value. It's just stress and anxiety and anger. Like me. Reasonable goalposts differentiate between short-term goals, like winning the NFC North, developing a young quarterback, and long-term aspirations, like contending for championships. And I think the hard part for a lot of Packer fans is that we've been at that phase the entire time. And so we've essentially reached the pinnacle, not the pinnacle like Super Bowl, but as high as you can get The height of pretty much everything that isn't a Super Bowl is attained by the Packers almost every year, and we take it entirely for granted. And so now it's just, well, you didn't win a Super Bowl, you suck. I mean, we get this every year. Yeah, you should be happy about that. That's freaking crazy. Probabilities versus guarantees. Championships are probabilistic outcomes. Even a great team might fall short due to bad luck, injuries, or other factors outside of their control. If you don't believe that, put your life savings on the team that is the best. If you're not willing to do that, then you already know that this is true, and you need to stop pretending that it's not. So, that is sort of the brainstorm that I had today, and it's going to help kind of form my opinion moving forward. So when I start to hear that, I'm going to remind you that you're conflating different things. Yes, Super Bowls are the ultimate aspirational expectation, but saying that people should be fired means that you're treating it like a baseline expectation, like showing up for work. And it's not. Winning the Super Bowl is not a basic expectation. And so you're doing it wrong. So, is it Super Bowl or bust? No. And what does bust mean anyways? Fire everybody? Get rid of Jordan? Like just rebuild with an even younger team? Like what are we talking about? The answer is very obviously no. Despite the adversity, despite the youth, despite the injuries, despite all the things that everybody says is terrible, despite having the worst GM and the worst coach and a terrible quarterback, which I would love for negative fans to reconcile, by the way. I asked Mr. Negative about this, and he just wanted to gloss over it. He's very good at just ignoring things and moving right past it. You don't like the GM, the coach is not good and should be fired, the defensive coordinator is not good and should be fired, and our quarterback is not very good. How in the world did we win 11 games? And how are we in the playoffs for the second year in a row? I'm very sorry to have to tell you this. You're going to have to pick a thing that's good. You're going to have to find something that you like. Somebody is carrying this team, and you're going to have to pick somebody. Because if you just say everybody sucks, you're very evidently wrong. Because teams with bad GMs, bad coaches, bad quarterbacks don't do anywhere near this good. They're easily top 10 picks, probably top 5 picks in the draft, depending on how many teams fit into that category, which actually there's kind of a lot. So, yeah, top 10. And then there is this, I won't mention who it is, but a relatively well-known figure, well-known especially for being sort of negative, which again, I'm glad that these people exist because there's a lot of negative fans and they need some kind of an outlet. They need some kind of writers, podcasters, etc. that they can attach to. But anyways, here is the tweet. And I'm kind of shocked because, to some degree you say, well, we have different perspectives and that's fine, but you're a respected person and, whatever. These are intelligent human beings. I don't know what to do with this, man. I don't know how to be kind with something like this. Here's the tweet. Matt LaFleur obviously won't be fired, but if the Packers are one and done in the playoffs, his seat should be very warm to start next season. A big-time coach doesn't lose today's game. It's as simple as that. That was written January 5th. So, all right. What are we talking about here? A big-time coach doesn't lose today's game. It's as simple as that. Do you know how many seconds do you think it would take me to find? You pick any coach you want, any coach in the world, Bill Belichick, anybody, Vince Lombardi. I don't give a crap who it is. Vince might be a little bit more tough because there's less teams, but I'm sure it happened. Anybody, and I will find you a game in which they lost to a bad team, especially within the division, because crazy stuff always happens in the division. It's going to be so unbelievably easy to dismiss this last sentence that a big-time coach doesn't lose today's game. It's as simple as that. It's shocking to me that somebody who's been doing this long doesn't have... I'm trying to be nice here. The absolute hatred and bias that people have completely clouds their ability to just have basic rationale through these things. I mean, come on, man. What are we talking about here? And then to go back to the last one, I mean, there's no argument being made other than to couple it with the last sentence, which is stupid. His seat should be warm starting next season if they're one and done. Why? Why? Can anyone give me a reason why? Why? Because if you lose to the Eagles, you're suck and should be fired? Are the Eagles that bad? Why? I cannot think of a single reason or a single way in which that sentence or those two sentences make any sense whatsoever. I mean, if you want to make a case that LaFleur has made too many mistakes, and if you look at several issues and you want to tie it to LaFleur, I would expect you to acknowledge that you don't actually know that he's the problem. But if you think he's the problem, then you could at least speculate that maybe you could do better in a certain situation. You would obviously need to. I mean, when I say need to, I mean in order for me to actually take you seriously, you would need to acknowledge that we could get significantly worse because you've actually watched the NFL. You've seen new coaches come in. You've seen disasters. You looked at the Raiders and the Bears and all these teams that constantly cycle through coaches the way that negative fans always want to. Again, like I've said, if negative fans actually ran a team, it would look almost identical to all the terrible teams. They give away all their draft picks. They spend all that draft capital and money on big-name, high-price free agents. They bring in fancy-named, big, flashy-name coaches. They fire them after a season or two because they have no patience and no willingness to rebuild. Everything is just unacceptable. I mean, this is what CEOs sound like. That's unacceptable. I won't accept that. You're fired. And then their team just sucks in perpetuity until they essentially get lucky. You know, you find somebody that's like the Lions. You got the owner over there that, doesn't super care about the Detroit Lions as much as they care about their freaking car corporation. But yeah, they just kind of stumble into a good front office person who brings in other good front office people and brings in a good coach, and you just kind of get lucky with it. But you suck at running everything. I mean, anybody, please explain how this could make sense. His seat should be warm to start next season if they're one and done in the playoffs. Why? I'd love to hear why. Because you're tired of going to the playoffs but not doing better in the playoffs? I'm so sorry to hear that. I really am. I also don't really believe you because I guarantee if I were to ask you, okay, Matt LaFleur's not very good, give me an example of another one, you'd start talking about other teams that don't do very well in the playoffs. It's one of those things where, if you ask people those questions first, when they got their guard down, they'll start talking about the Buffalo Bills coaches and the Buffalo Bills GM and the Ravens and all these teams. And they're just with the highest regard. Interesting, because I thought they should have been fired because they don't perform in the postseason very well. Huh. Good to know. By the way, in the comments, I didn't even have to look it up because the comments section obviously spent the 5 seconds to go find something. Joshua says, Bill Belichick lost to Ryan Fitzpatrick at home with a bye on the line. So, whoops. And it's so hilarious if you read the comment section. You have the irrational, flailing, angry people that just want everybody fired, and then people were coming in like, what the hell are you talking about? GM has to go. Followed by, actually, it happens all the time. Right? I mean, it's just random anger followed by just very obvious common sense. I think the funniest comment says, then you haven't been writing for the Packers since the 80s. Because again, I mean, and that's what's so annoying is you're just lying. You're just lying. And I don't think that you know that you're lying. I think you're just saying random angry things and you're not taking 5 seconds to sit, calm down, and reflect on the words that are actually coming out of your mouth, which as a writer, you would think that would be an important part is to make sure that you're choosing your words carefully. But I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. But that would be my preference, is for us to actually be intentional with what we're saying, because I'm just kind of exhausted with the hyperbole and just saying things that are not true, and to have to constantly feel like I'm playing tug of war here, where I'm just constantly having to reel in nonsense, where it's like no, that's too far, no, that's too much, no, that's a little crazy, and here's the very obvious proof of that I shouldn't have to bring up. And, oh boy, well, no, let's calm down a little bit. No, I mean, that wasn't good, but let's calm down a little bit. It's nonstop. Yes, the Packers lost to the Bears, and it was because they didn't play well, and because the coach made 2-3 bad coaching decisions, and that makes it not look super great as far as their odds against the Eagles in Philly, although very obviously they could win. It's just that, the odds are not, it's below 50%, understandably. And so, yeah, What do we do about it? Fire everybody because we're not 9-point favorites going into the playoffs? Like, just freaking relax, dude. Jeez. I'm very sorry to tell you that the Packers probably aren't going to win the Super Bowl. You know what? The Eagles probably aren't either. So what? Should we just both forfeit? I'm not asking you to see things with rose-colored glasses. I'm just asking you to freaking calm down and see what's actually in front of you. There's some things that are bad. They're not nearly as large as you are saying that they are. And then there are some things that are good, and those things are way more plentiful than you will acknowledge that they are. And I just wish you would look at the whole picture, I guess is what I would hope. Another thing I've noticed about some of the more negative fans, and I think positive fans do this from the other perspective too, is the inability to give any ground. And this is true of absolutely everything, and it's so obnoxious. It's why politics has gotten so stupid. Because if there's anything that is even perceived to be a positive of things I don't like, or a negative of things or people that are on my side or anything like that, it has to be completely dismissed. And so we argue for things that are complete nonsense just because we don't want to give any ground. So if I say anything positive, it's not that big of a deal to just concede it, to just be like, yeah, that's good. So what? Yeah, those are all good. I still don't feel good about the game. And we would probably agree on most stuff. But the fact is, a lot of the negative fans don't want to give ground on them. No, they're bad. No, it's bad. Everything's bad. Bad is bad. Because I'm not happy with where the team is right now, I'm not allowed to admit that anything is good. You got to stop doing that. Nothing is as dramatic as you guys are making it out to be. All right? Okay. Well, I'm going to leave it at that. Hopeful for some more positive developments on the injury front tomorrow. We shall see. I'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.